Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Leadership Trademarked podcast. I'm excited today to introduce this episode, which is particularly close to my heart. Today, I'm joined by co-hosts Roz and Leslie, and our guest today is Lina Tsakiris. Lina is the co-chair of Canadian Insider Risk Management Center of Excellence, and we will be exploring a vital topic: the relationship between employee engagement and information security. We'll dive into how the intersection of employee engagement and organizational culture plays a critical role in insider risk management programs. After all, employee engagement is the cornerstone of these programs. When they fail, we fail. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Lina, welcome.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's a great pleasure to be here and very important subject matter. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. Not all of us are familiar with security and information security. So how would you define information security and why is it so crucial in today's world?
That's a great question. I think that's the right jumping point to start this discussion this evening. And, what I want to do is take off my technical hat and really make this a consumable discussion for anyone that would be tuning into this podcast. So, of course, when we look at information security, it's no big secret. A lot of what we do, the way we live our lives in and outside of our homes, is very much in the digital or logical space. We're constantly online. Researching, ordering personal products. We're online completing our work, our day-to-day work for our employers, for those of us like myself that are not lucky enough to be retired just yet. So it's very centric to our lifestyle. And really, when we look at information security specifically, it's really about how we protect our sensitive information. That could be personal information, banking information, from individuals that might gain unauthorized access to that information and steal it, corrupt it, destroy it. That's largely what information security is. And of course, from what we see today in terms of technology advancements, sophistication, there are numerous ways that we can protect ourselves from having an untoward scenario happen, whether in the workplace or in our personal lives.
That's really interesting. This is a very new area or a new topic for me. And so I hear a lot about insider risk, and that sounds like something that might be connected to our topic of employee engagement. So could you talk a little bit about what is insider risk and what we can do to protect ourselves from that?
I can, Leslie, and you're right. You're absolutely right. It's very topical these days. We all, I'm sure, can recall the days of Edward Snowden, very much front and center Hollywood production around what happened with that particular threat scenario in the insider space. Insider risk is largely, if you put an organizational lens on it, it is largely about any individual who has or had, and that's important, I'll get to that in a moment, authorized access to information, to systems, to physical locations. And that's not only employees, it can also be third-party service providers, it could be contractors. And when I say had or has, we often think about insider risks, if we put it in an organizational setting, things that we don't want to happen that happen in the workplace, in current state. But it's also around individuals that might have had intimate knowledge. They had exposure to a particular workplace setting. And for whatever reason, and there are several, and why this can occur, they've come back to harm the the organization, whether that's digitally through unauthorized or authorized access because it wasn't turned off, or they have physically returned to a location to cause harm or an untoward scenario. So when we pull back the focus on that and we look at it more at the macro level, what you're seeing is threats happening from within an organization. We see that thematically across the globe. As I mentioned before, very much what I call a headline risk. We often see it every day in social media. There's been some type of compromise. Information was taken from an organization by perhaps an employee and sold for personal financial gain to a competitor. So it's very much topical, certainly in the security space, and it's topical for any organization that wants to effectively protect their assets and their people.
So the insider risk that you're talking about, Lina, does that represent a majority of the sources of cyber risk? So it's not generally an outside boogie person. It's often coming from a former connection with the organization.
That's right. So it could be a current or a former connection. To answer your first question, the relationship between insider risk and information cybersecurity, it certainly has a place there. We know that threat actors around cyber and information security can certainly be external as well. But often what you see is when it comes to taking unauthorized information in an unauthorized manner and from an organization, if you are facilitating that as an insider, at some point, those two worlds could intersect and that information could leave the organization. What we see causal factors around that is information taken for political reasons. It could be sold to foreign state or provided to foreign state actors. That's a very topical threat right now globally. At times, it's also taken by individuals who are looking to use that information as a bargaining chip. So they're selling that information for personal financial gain, or they're using it to take to their next employer. So there is a very strong relationship between information security and insider risk.
I have a question. First of all, Lina, thank you. I came out of the banking world, so I do have an understanding of insider risk about assets and liabilities. I'm not going down that path, but I have a question. So when the security experts, that's you and your people, share the information that employees generally need in order to engage in the new whatever, if you're understanding me, are they able to speak to the strategy, and does the strategy impact the employee's job security? Now I hope that's not too complicated, but in a lot of the work I did as a change agent, I was very close to the top and the source of why we were doing various things. However, that information was not information that could be shared because it might be 6 or 12 or 18 months down the path. And so employees were often left, in my personal opinion, with not enough information about how to do their job. And when that happened, they were frustrated. They didn't trust. They didn't see that they had a future. They felt left out, and we lose good people. And the flip side of it is, don't make a mistake and tell the wrong person the strategy, because then the whole shebang gets mucked up. So I'm just wondering, with this kind of stuff, which is, it's way riskier than the stuff I was talking about, I think.
Yeah.
How do you get your tech experts to be engaged with your staff, or the people who have to be on board with what's going on? How do you do that if you can't tell them the whole story?
Right. And that is seminal, if you will, to having a successful insider risk program organizationally. And I'll tell you why. I love that you asked this question, Rosalind. It really is the crux of what makes programs succeed or fail organizationally, because at the end of the day, employees are what drives the organization forward.
Right.
They're the keys to success. And working in an environment where you feel psychologically safe to express your views, but you also in return have transparency around what the organization is doing, planning, what direction they're going in, is going to keep you engaged. And when employees are engaged, when they're feeling a sense of self-worth, when they're feeling valued for their contribution, they're happy. And happy employees contribute to a larger positive work environment and a culture of wellness. And when you have that,
Right.
statistically, this is evidence-based, not just my personal opinion. We've done undertaken quite a bit of research at the center here around employee dissatisfaction and the correlation between that and increased insider risk. If you take what is the quote from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
It applies here as well. What we aim to do with successful insider risk mitigation and just overall better employee engagement is to ensure that ongoing collaboration and empowerment to employees is a central theme for an organization. And how do we do that? We teach them how to practice appropriate and good security hygiene in their day-to-day practices. Why do we do that? Because we want our employees to come in to a safe workspace every day. So they're feeling secure, they're feeling engaged, they're feeling valued. So there are many pathways to achieving that, but what we see overall is increased contribution, increased productivity. We're seeing a sense of positive security hygiene. We're also seeing increased, when I say reporting, I don't mean that this is insider risk programs are not a big brother campaign. It's quite the opposite. As I mentioned, it's about creating a culture of prevention. So what we're seeing is increased escalations around, I think I saw something, but I'm not sure what that was. And I'm just going to, I'm going to make an inquiry, and here's the information, here's what I saw, and leave it up to the security experts to investigate and decide whether or not that behavior or that observation is concerning.
So you have that built into a process of communication and understanding between their job and the information. So I'm really happy to hear that, because my experience is old, but it was very real. And it was at a time when everything was going online. So you can imagine the chaos and, of course, the risk. The difficulty around engagement was that actually none of us knew what the hell was going on, except for the people who were driving the new programs. And they were all we called techies, introverts. They weren't really good at relationship. And so it was very difficult to send them out or bring them into meetings, because they weren't the most outgoing, friendly, affable, let's all do this together.
Right.
And they were very conscious of, the security around it and the timing of it, knowing that, release 4 was going to change 30% of the jobs. But those 30% of the people 2 years down the road didn't want to know about it. So I'm just wondering if, like, everybody's younger now and technology and stuff is comfortable with a lot of people, not so much with me, but I didn't grow up with it. So I'm just wondering how that expertise of the security expert, who's a whiz-bang, transfers that into a conversation with somebody who has to do an ABC.
Yeah, it's and you're right. It's a ones and zeros conversation versus an ABC. So there's a couple of things I would say around that. One of the things that we try and do as security practitioners, and we train for it, is really get into the hearts and minds of people, right?
Okay.
We need buy-in for our programs, right? And these are cost centers. Sometimes we're seen as cost centers. You're not revenue generating per se, but you are actually boosting cost avoidance if we were talking about it from a financial perspective. If I'm not introducing a security solution that's preventative in nature, or I'm not mitigating appropriate risks, that could certainly impact the organization's bottom line. So how do you get the team to come along? How do you get the non-security folks to come along? Number one, transparency, as I said, is really important. Two, security is a team sport. I have just as much to learn from others as they do from me. So when I'm liaising with my marketing department, and my communications department, because we're launching, let's say, an awareness campaign, I know I'm going to be educated on the components that are certainly outside of my wheelhouse. But in return, I'm also going to use that as an opportunity to cross-educate my interests, my needs. So that combined effort ends up being more of a force multiplier and an accelerator. And when you look across the organization, I think everybody has something to contribute. At the end of the day, insider risk is very much completely about people, more than it is ones and zeros, but it's finding the right language.
So it sounds like the base it all builds on is one of genuine, open, honest conversation, lots of questions and lots of listening to build the trust to even start the conversation.
And the awareness. There are two things I would say overall about employee engagement from the security perspective. One, not every individual is looking to that has engaged in an untoward scenario has done it in a malicious context. People make mistakes. Organizations are asking employees to do more with less. They're working longer hours. We've had the whole remote work conversation. We're all still having it in different environments. And, there's several schools of thought around employee engagement. Sometimes employees can be outsmarted by an external threat actor. We're all familiar with the malware that could be embedded into an email and sent to you, and you're clicking on that suspicious link. And next thing you know, you may have invited an opportunity for a threat actor to infiltrate and take information unwittingly. You may be on a timeline and, you may be careless. Maybe you sent some information to your personal email address because you want to do some work on the weekend. And that information might be sensitive, and it's going from a controlled environment into a not controlled environment. So all those things matter. That's one thing. The other thing I would say around employee engagement is what I see, and statistically what we see, with the exception of a few threat types, employees generally join organizations because they want to have a positive work experience. They want to be an effective contributor. They want to be part of the culture. But sometimes, as we know, people change. There's what we call stressors that can happen in the workplace. Maybe there was an unmet expectation. They didn't get the promotion that they were looking for. That can cause disgruntledness. Possibly something's changed at home. There's a gambling issue. There's a divorce. There's drug dependency. There's coercion. Myriad of reasons that I've seen that have influenced how an employee can change over time
and
in the
those
workplace.
Things are not talked about at the office.
More so now than ever. But what we are teaching our workforce to do, and this is the key really, is leveraging your workforce to be security allies. We cannot be everywhere. So a people leader will certainly notice a change in one of their employees. They have a better opportunity to detect that than myself. That would be working in proximity next to them and could see these, what we call a departure from normative behavior. All of that to say, there's a lot of opportunity to interrupt someone that is disgruntled and is about to go down the pathway to harm, and provide support, provide the resources, including employee assistance programs that they might need. But to even stay more preventative than that, as I mentioned before, the key is really transparency and creating a proactive culture of prevention.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Very cool.
Thank you.
You go, girl.
Oh, no. Well, thank you very much. It's like I said, it's a collective, it's a collaboration. And as we say in the security world, and Sylvia can attest to this, security is everyone's business. Like, it takes all of us. It is a team sport.
You know,
No,
this is
thank you.
really interesting because it kind of ties into a topic that has always been a hobby horse of mine, and that's innovation and how we treat innovation within large organizations. I have been around organizations where the penalty for trying something innovative and not succeeding is far greater than the reward that you might get for trying an innovation and succeeding. And I think that, I think organizations need guidance in recognizing that this is how sometimes people get treated. Do you have any insights on that or any advice on that particular topic?
I sure do, Leslie. That could be just an entirely separate podcast, but the snapshot of that is I can even give you a personal view, and it starts with, it's very much what I call a business agility concept. It's about creating safe to fail environments. Why are they important organizationally? Here's my personal view. I love to fail because that's when I learn. And I fail often and I fail fast. That's intentional. Everything that we do in the strategy space, it's a hypothesis. You're not sure if it's going to work or not. It sounds great, but you need to plug that in and you need to test it out. You need to come up with a proof of concept or a prototype. And it's okay. You're supposed to fail at that point when you're piloting. That's when you get to work out all the little kinks that need to be worked out so you can have a successful outcome. And what we are doing is advocating as security practitioners to create those safe to fail environments. A, because it drives innovation. B, because you're going to see people come out with a much stronger view and voice, especially individuals that are not the first to speak up in meetings because they're afraid, but they have great ideas. And those are the individuals that I want to be talking to. I want to know what they're thinking. The other thing that we do, and I do this personally in meetings, I'm known for it, is say, I love intellectual contrast. I want you to disagree with me. Tell me that I am wrong and how we can make this right, please. And that to me is the crux, again, of what accelerates innovation in organizational settings.
Thank you for that.
You're a cool lady.
Oh, I don't know if my family and friends would agree with you, Ross, but
Well,
thank
send
you.
them over. I'll
will.
set them straight.
Only Sylvia agrees with
Well,
that.
but what I'm hearing as the base for all of this is straightforward talk, authenticity, and asking a lot of questions.
Exactly.
Without, from a point of view of curiosity, not punishing.
Yes. And it's okay not to know everything there is, though, right from the outset. It's okay to make mistakes. It's even okay if you clicked on that malicious link, malware, tell us so we can fix it, right? That's the other part. Employees are afraid to come forward when they've made a mistake because they're afraid of that backlash, that what used to be maybe a more punitive, approach to management that I think organizations have largely, I hope, changed in Western culture.
So about 6 months ago, I got scammed. This is a very long story. I'm not going to tell you it all, but at the end of it, which took hours and hours and hours, I think I was talking to all the security people in the whole world, and we finally got it sorted. And I said to the guy, how does this happen? And he said, we don't know. They're way ahead of us, meaning the crooks. And I said, so it's not my fault. I'm not bad. He said, no, you're not bad. It's not your fault. This happens. And because you've done most of the things you're supposed to do, you're going to get back your $8,000. And I did. That's pretty cool.
I would say so. And it's timely that we're having that kind of discussion because it is October and it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And awareness is the key, tooling your workforce to practice, as we talked about, good security hygiene is the key because they're not only practicing it in the workplace, they're taking those lessons home. And when you distill that even further, often for employees that have children, young children at home, they really need to be careful how they're interacting online. So these are great lessons that are learned. But you're absolutely right to say that you practice your due diligence and, largely were able to recover and even be compensated for some of the losses there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. The other aspect I would raise that I didn't talk about is treating your workforce like adults.
Yeah,
We did some
please.
research, an entire research paper on this a few years back, and how much productivity increases when you allow people to have agency, where you're not micromanaging, my team, someone's at a doctor's appointment, it's their responsibility to manage their time effectively, and I'm in full support. So I think that a little bit of that autocratic type leadership hopefully has escaped most organizations these days. You're going to have a lot of a
So
happier
Lena, I've done
workforce.
a lot of executive coaching, and I mean, these are good, smart people with a lot of power and yada, yada, yada. But it becomes difficult somehow, for whatever reason, for them to lead. And I love what you just said, because I mean, we get through it and they figure it out, and I show them how, and they practice, and it gets better. And it's no blame, no shame here. But it would have been so much easier if I could just said, like, I remember one guy, he said, well, I've got this big thing to do and you have to help me because I've got 5,000 people reporting to me and I don't know what they do. I said, oh, that. And he said, yeah. I said, why don't you ask them? He said, I wouldn't know what to ask. Now, and
Yeah.
that's reality. Now, he was a terrific guy, but that was a piece of connection or engagement or conversation that he hadn't mastered. But I really like what you said, because I'm just, I just went through my brain all these. I thought, well, why don't you treat them as adults instead of children?
Yeah, it's amazing how you'll start to see
Yeah,
superpowers
yeah,
just flourish, like people's
yeah.
strengths will really come out. And you start to see where you can go as one team and bring them along the moment you give them a little bit of agency. So absolutely essential and absolutely critical when it comes to employee satisfaction and employee engagement, for sure.
Very cool.
That's very cool. And I've been sitting in the background and it's just joy listening to you. Having been in the area of security, but also in changing cultures, and this is a lot about changing cultures. So I have a question though, Lina, in terms of the trends. So you're at the forefront of this. You have been for a number of years. You're the founder and the co-chair of the Center of Excellence. What do you see as trends or things that are coming up, things that, hey, this is where this industry is going into. Here's where organizations should start to look at in terms of not just employee engagement, but
Yeah.
information security overall.
Yeah. So there's a lot happening at the macro level. We're seeing one would argue, and I'm not going to get political, but history in some ways repeating itself, right? Geopolitically, there's a lot of polarization that's happening across the world. We have strife, we have war, we have things that are certainly impacting our personal safety, the economy. So all these variables, when they're distilled, believe me, have an impact to the work that I do every day within my mandates. And what I see being topical moving forward is perhaps an increase in espionage. We're starting to see a lot more cases like that pop up across the board. This takes us back to the days of the Cold War. It's just done in a different format. So you've seen this if you're reading, headline risk. You're reading about threat events that have a lot of espionage at the center of the activity. Not a surprise when you look at what's happening geopolitically. We're also seeing some very material advancements in technology. So I haven't spoken about AI, artificial intelligence, but we know that's a front and center accelerator on both sides of the security and safety equation. And when I say both sides, both on the proactive risk mitigation side for organizations that want to use AI to advance their technical capabilities and also their protection envelopes. But you're also seeing it on the threat actor side
Yeah. Yeah.
for, to be employed in a more nefarious, dark art type context. So that's something that we need to definitely stay educated on and stay as much as we can in front of. The third piece around this is really about sophistication. Wow, criminal networks are very well networked. They certainly operate, as we know, in the digital space. So time and speed to launching a successful cyber attack or exfiltrating information, it's much more readily barrier free to do these days and do it successfully and perhaps even go undetected. So that level of sophistication is something we need to either stay ideally in front of or at least lockstep with. And what happens and what I'm noticing is they're changing tactics much more frequently than they used to. So by the time we've solved for something, we've, security practitioners have their budgets. They've introduced a new risk mitigation strategy. By the time it's implemented, tested, you're almost looking at a second iteration that's needed to stay ahead, right? And the other part of that, Sylvia, and you know this, is they only have to get it right once.
Yeah.
We have to get it right every time. And that is very difficult to do.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, we can, if there's anything that we take away, is that continuous development and continuous growth and that continuous education and being aware and from an employee engagement perspective, what we need to really focus on is how well do we measure our effectiveness in terms of employee engagement? How well are we connected to the culture? And are we continuously? It's not a one day thing, or once a year thing. It's something that we have to do all the time in order to protect us. I love what you said, and we know this from our industry, is that you cannot have a security advisor or a for every single employee every time they click on something. So obviously we need to make sure that education continues and that the employee is aware and educated to say, yeah, okay, you know what, I'm not gonna do this, nor am I going to just turn around and say, oh, that's not my problem. I don't need to worry about that. We want them to come forward and say, hey, I saw this, I'm not quite sure what this is about. I'm going to call someone and let them deal with this because I don't know, but I know there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really makes our annual planning cycle really obsolete too. It's you don't have a year to respond, do you?
You don't, and as well, measuring success in your program and employee satisfaction, like we go back to employee surveys, we're all familiar. That is such a great tool if you allow it to be, because it really is a temperature check of what's going on organizationally. How is your workforce feeling? And it helps you proactively identify hotspots. And as an insider risk practitioner, that type of data and that type of information is a great tool for us. It's really important. So there's also some opportunities, I think, there as well.
The question that I'd like to ask is, I recognize that cybersecurity engagement can be critical in a safety sense, but engagement in cybersecurity can also require people to be better at actively looking for risks. Now, being better at engagement and actively looking for risks can have a detrimental effect on one's well-being if this is the state that they're in work, as well as carrying it sort of out of work, right? Because the attitude that we're bringing into work tends to be the attitude that's hard to leave at the door when coming home. So I'm wondering if you have any strategies on managing burnout as well as engagement, because it seems like a fine line in this kind of work.
I do, and it's tough. I mean, we have a very long tenured, too long background where, as a security practitioner, we're often even outside of the digital space in the kinetic space. You do witness untoward scenarios. You do deal with some very hostile environments. And, I'm going to start off very bluntly and just say, don't bring work home. But it's not that easy. And we practice that every day, where what's important is to identify, first of all, allow yourself to be vulnerable and human and understand you're not a robot or a light switch. So stuff, as you pointed out, will come home with you. And if you're feeling that you haven't transitioned from your office self to your home self, you need to identify that when you get home.
And don't go home yet.
Yeah, yes. And don't go home. I'm not suggesting you should stop off somewhere and have a drink.
No.
I'm simply saying that self-awareness, that mindfulness is important. It's also important to practice that mindfulness, like do things in your off time that are going to inspire you, make you happy, get the rest that you need. They're pretty much the same lifestyle management techniques that we would probably recommend to most people, right, in stressful roles. And at this day and age, it really doesn't matter what your occupation is. We're just seeing a lot of individuals, or some individuals may not be necessarily functioning at the same level of health, emotional, psychological health as others. So make sure, I call it the emergency list. I have 10 things that I love to do, because when I am stressed, I forget. I'm so stressed, I forget what makes me happy. And I actually have it in digital and hard copy. I pull out my emergency list and I'll do one or two of those activities. And some of those activities are as simple as go out for a walk, maybe spend some downtime reading, talk to a family member or a friend, words of encouragement. I like to spend some time with my dog. She makes me happy. It's really very simple things. I love to cook, so I'll cook a great meal even if I don't feel like eating it. And by the time I'm through that exercise, I tend to feel a lot better. So have that emergency list in your back pocket.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Lina. This was wonderful. Very, so happy to have you on our show. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot.
And I just have to say one thing to interrupt you. I feel so much safer now.
I'm glad you do, Roslyn. And you can always reach out if I can help in any way. But I really appreciate being part of this discussion today. We've covered some really topical and important issues around employee satisfaction, employee engagement, but also how that actually contributes to the overall culture prevention we're looking at building, but also some of the personal security hygiene that we need to practice as citizens to stay safe in what's an ever-evolving threat landscape. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, it's just so interesting, too, that you and Sylvia started in an industry and just watching how the two of you and your roles have evolved and expanded into something it's just a very different thing now.
And Leslie, when we started, we were both blondes.
Well, mine is kind of a gray blonde now.
You both look fantastic and sound fantastic. So, yes, Sylvia and I have, it actually, we've done so much collaboration and shoulder leaning around solving for some of the same issues that we've seen from in our own organizations through the years. And she's just been a fantastic colleague and peer and friend, always so resourceful, and she has such a pulse on what's happening. And it's just amazing to watch her flourish.
Yes, she does. You're right. You're right.
We love her. You can't have her to
What's not to love, for sure. What's not to love? Yeah.
Thank you, Lina. No, likewise as well, right? I appreciate it. It's that continued collaboration, I think, that keeps us up to speed, right? And up to date and being aware.